One came up in a big way right after the president's national address, and that's the concept of presidential emergency action documents. And so, I've talked a bit about it. I did some research about it, and there's this kind of shadowy notion that there's some documents sitting in a safe in the White House that go back to Eisenhower, perhaps, if I've got that right, that envision various scenarios that might permit a president, based on some existing laws authorities, that to interpret the scenario in a certain way and allow the president to take some extraordinary actions. Tell us about what that means, and if it's possible that Trump has authored some new emergency action documents.
Well, you said it very well. I mean, these are draft presidential orders, executive orders, and directives that are teed up ahead of time in anticipation of a wide range of worst case scenarios, so that they are ready to go into effect with just the president's signature if one of these emergency situations were to come to pass. They originated in the Eisenhower administration as part of efforts to ensure continuity of government in the wake of a possible Soviet nuclear attack. But over the decades, they've expanded to address other types of emergencies as well. They are extremely closely held. None of these documents has ever been publicly released or even leaked. But we do know a little bit about the contents of some of the older PEADs because of some other official documents that describe them. And what we know is that the presidential emergency action documents going up to about 1970 purported to do things like implement martial law, unilaterally suspend habeas corpus. In other words, the president suspends it rather than Congress, which is what the Constitution says. The roundup and detention of people who are on a list of subversives, a list that at one point apparently included about 10,000 people, warrantless seizure of property, and censorship of the press. These are actions that at the time under existing law, and certainly now, were illegal and or unconstitutional. And really the concern about these PEADs, and again, we know much less about the contents of current PEADs. We know that these documents do undergo periodic revision. And we know that as of the first Trump administration, they were undergoing one of these periodic revisions. And at the time, there were between 50 and 60 of them. So that much we know. But the reason why we worry about PEADs is this. Advanced planning is not a bad idea. That part is not worrisome. That's good. We want administrations to be thinking ahead. We want them to have plans that have really been thought through and carefully vetted from a legal perspective as well, so that they are ready to go. If we learned anything from COVID, we learned that advanced planning is really important. And when you don't have it, it's problematic. The thing that's worrisome about PEADs is that historically, they appeared to authorize actions that are illegal. And in combination with that, these documents are not shared, as far as we know, with anyone in Congress. So there is no independent oversight outside of the executive branch of these documents. That's really problematic, both because Congress needs to be included in advanced planning. Congress will have a role, but also to the extent that the administration is, purporting to do things under laws that don't allow it, Congress has a role in saying, no, that's not what this law is, or maybe changing the law if they need to. And it's quite remarkable that Congress has no oversight here, given that even the most highly classified covert military and intelligence operations by law have to be shared with, at least the so-called Gang of Eight. So that's why PEADs are particularly concerning, in my view.
Yeah, for sure. And we don't know what's in that safe right now. How did we even, you mentioned during the first Trump administration, there was an indication that they were perhaps revising.
Yeah.
How do we even know that?
That was part of a budget request by the Department of Justice. They wanted to, show how they were using the money and ask for the money. And they said, this is one of the things we're doing. We're reviewing these PEADs, but it didn't say anything about the contents of the PEADs. You mentioned something that's really important, which is that the actions in these documents have to rely on some kind of existing authority. The PEADs themselves are not laws. They cannot give the president powers that the president doesn't otherwise have under the Constitution or under laws passed by Congress. That's really important because I think some of the concern around PEADs is that they would somehow authorize actions that were otherwise unauthorized, and that's not the case. So I think that's an important distinction.
Clarify this for us, because you're telling us that a lot of what we know PEADs might have authorized or tried to authorize it would be illegal,
right.
But yet we hear about suspension of habeas corpus, the ability to just grab people off the streets, not necessarily probable cause, the issuance of general warrants, the ability to search and seize without probable cause. That sounds illegal to me, but yet we think that's in the PEADs.
Well, that was in the PEADs. I mean, they underwent very substantial revision in the 1980s. Again, we don't really know what came out on the other side, but that was right after a period of time where there was a real reckoning over executive power in the wake of Watergate and COINTELPRO and CIA domestic spying and a whole bunch of other abuses. And it led to a very different approach, frankly, to national security and intelligence activities of the government. It is very possible that some of the more obvious overreaches in the early PEADs no longer exist. But we don't know that. And something that's important to realize is that even though these older documents were talking about things that were illegal, there was no way to test them in courts. There was no way to get a court to say, hey, wait a minute, that's illegal, because they weren't out there in the public and they were never acted on as far as we know. So there was never a chance for an authoritative body, for the courts, to weigh in and say this exceeds what's permitted by law. That is one of the concerns also about current PEADs. They may not go quite as far as the old ones did, although who knows. But they almost certainly are pushing the boundaries. That's kind of the point of them to some extent.
Right.
And they're doing so in a context where neither of the other branches has any visibility or any ability to push back.
And the older ones, or any one that's already existing, could be dusted off and signed by Trump if he wanted to. Do I have that right?
Sure. Honestly, PEADs are a tool for presidents who really want to plan in advance. And they want to carefully think through their actions before engaging in them and make sure that all of the stakeholders in government have weighed in and that it's been thoroughly vetted from a legal and practical perspective. That's what PEADs are meant to accomplish. That doesn't really feel like the MO of this administration.
Are you implying there's not a lot of careful planning in advance?
So I would be more concerned. I mean, it's not that I'm not concerned about President Trump's possible reliance on PEADs that may have been drafted during his first administration or just in the last year and a half. I am equally concerned that he might act, spontaneously, off the cuff, and draft an executive order over a period of 24 hours and put it out there. And it's not like that order would somehow have more or less legal authority behind it just because there was a PEAD that somebody drafted in advance. So I'm equally, if not more, concerned about President Trump just sort of acting,